We're taking a peek into geek culture and sharing our top 10 fandom favorites. Let Your Geek Sideshow presents Geek Culture Countdown. Hey guys, this is Kitty.
And Melanie.
And we are coming to you from the Sideshow Studios in Southern California. Welcome back to the Geek Culture Countdown. This week we are weaving together a list of the top 10 superhero capes. These impressive threads add fashion to any comic book character's ensemble, giving our heroes some dramatic flair and occasional additional powers. They flutter and defy physics, rarely causing a disastrous fashion faux pas despite what you might have heard about jet engines. Listen along to find out which capes have comfortably settled on the shoulders at the top of the list. Let's get started. All right. Thank you for joining me, Mel.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
This one was a fun and weird one because every superhero costume kind of has to be functional, but sometimes these characters just like to have a little bit of additional style, and what better way to do so than with a cape?
Can't really beat that classic superhero pose, hands on the hips.
Yeah.
And the cape billowing behind you.
Yeah, I actually recently discovered in Dungeons & Dragons there's an item called the Cape of Billowing where you can just expend a use of magic to make it flutter dramatically behind you, but it offers no protection in battle or anything. So it's some of these characters, that's exactly what it is. You just need that little bit of oomph.
I mean, it's maybe a little intimidating. It's more of a mental warfare than actual functional, like physical damage.
Yeah, and I think capes did get a pretty bad rap after The Incredibles. Yes, in that superhero universe, those capes have caused a lot of problems for people, but with the number of Marvel and DC heroes you see kind of gallivanting through the skies or around the city, it is a wonder it hasn't caused more problems, but they do seem to be an extension of the hero themselves. Also, we did get some distinction between like capes versus cloaks. Like shrouds, cloaks, hoods, there's so many different things, but basically if it goes over the shoulders, that's what we're looking at today. Kind of it adds that extra oomph, as I said, to your costume. So don't get into the weeds with us on cloak versus cape, especially not when we, spoiler alert, get to the character whose name is Cloak on this list. But you have number 10 on our list. Do you want to start us off?
I will start us off. Number 10 is Dr. Doom of Marvel Comics. His cape is kind of interesting because he wears a full suit of armor and really has no need for a cape. I'm sure he's plenty warm in his armor, and the cape offers no added protection, but he wears it as a sign of his sovereignty because he is a ruler. And so it's more a sign of respect me. And what I found kind of interesting was in Fantastic Four 85, he wears a pink cape with white leopard print trim to have his portrait painted.
Oh my goodness, I've never seen that before.
It's a fun panel because it's literally, that classic England, King of England with like the red and the white trim.
Yes.
And he's having his portrait painted.
Oh my goodness. I could almost hear in his voice when someone would be like, "Why are you wearing a cape? You're in a full suit of armor." And I could hear him saying like, "Doom is plenty warm." Like that's just like a thing that he would say. But interesting to your point in the kind of before we started the countdown, you mentioned it's like a mental warfare thing. I don't know if this holds true to this day, but historically, Marvel had this kind of unspoken rule of not every superhero gets a cape. The ones who do have godlike powers are actually a god. So like Storm and Thor and or they have a god complex. So, I mean, Doom has had godlike powers, but I think he more falls under the category of a god complex.
Absolutely.
Because it is a very mental thing. Like I am this.
I am above you.
Yeah. And here's my cape to prove it. Number 9 on our list is Shazam from DC Comics. But Shazam is also known to some as Captain Marvel. And I actually looked this up, and I'm not sure how much of this also holds true. But because he was originally a captain, his first design in Fawcett Comics kind of had some historical military influence. And so Shazam is known for his half-length white cape with gold trim. Usually it goes over one shoulder. Some people have it where it's pretty evenly situated behind his back, but it's always that half-length cape. very shiny. And yeah, there's like a woven clasp with a big gold button on his shoulder. And sometimes it has a hood that he can flip up, and in some versions, like the new 52, they did make it longer because capes also always seem to be changing length when it suits the artist. But uniquely, like especially the Alex Ross drawings of Shazam, like that shorter cape, it kind of also gives you the sense of Shazam being a child, like Billy Batson. It not necessarily like, oh, he's outgrown his kitty cape, but it sets him apart from the other superheroes who do have that like long, regal kind of flowing fabric.
Right, like he hasn't quite earned his tails, like his cape length yet.
Yeah, but it is cool that it does seem to have a historical grounding in like captainship. I think it's mostly French military.
Yeah,
that little whoosh over the shoulder.
The fancy.
All right, you got the next one on our list.
Number 8 is Storm from Marvel Comics. And so, as we discussed, Marvel had the God complex, godlike powers, or God. So she falls under those and gets to, not all of them, obviously, but she gets to have a cape and it helps her fly on the wind, which is helpful given her powers of, weather manipulation.
Yeah, it's kind of like a sail for her sailboat kind of. And it's just, that my brain immediately for the X-Men always goes to the 90s cartoon intro and just seeing the long like white cape. Her cape's also interesting because it's connected at her wrists, which I guess would give her better flight
control over like what the right physics words are.
Maybe?
Sure.
Yeah.
That works.
We're not scientists. We're fashion police this week. But she does have that kind of control because if you think even the black version of the cape, it kind of actually swoops down and is almost more like a shawl or like a
shrug.
Yeah, almost. But it does have that cape-like quality in the wings to it.
I'm not a scientist and I'm also not good at fashion.
Oops, I'm sorry. This is an extremely difficult podcast to talk about that. So number 7 on our list, speaking of gods as well, is Mr. Miracle from DC Comics. He is one of the new gods created by Jack Kirby. He's also an escape artist known as Scott Free. So when I was Googling
that is
Mr. Miracle cape, Google was auto-completing to escape a lot. So he's an escape artist. He's from the world of New Genesis, and he was traded to the planet Apocalypse as a child in this weird bargain with between the two rulers, Darkseid and then the king of New Genesis, and was like, hey, like, let's not go to war. Let's do a sun swap. But his cape remained from New Genesis and is actually made of a memory fibroid that can interact with the mother box item, which, look, I love Jack Kirby. I don't pretend to understand what a mother box is. I know they were a huge plot point in the Justice League film, but Mr. Miracle also has a mother box that can interact with his cape, but apparently the energy of transforming it into kind of like a protective cocoon eventually destroys the cape. His cape is green as well. I should have mentioned that. It's a green, very high collar. A lot of these guys really like the high collars.
I'm into the high collar.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It frames the face nicely.
I mean, if you're going to go with a cape, go big or go home.
Or, I mean, in Shazam's case, like it works. But yeah, a lot of these
the
guys.
hood's cool too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it gives a collar-like feel. Because if it's not on your head, it sits up a bit.
But Scott Free has a full-on pointed collar that actually goes above his head in some depictions. So he kind of looks like Headless Horseman. And it complements his red and yellow costume very well.
I kind of wish that this was
on film,
a video format. So
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was doing like a turtle thing. I use my hands a lot in the studio. I'm using it to describe the flourish of every cape in here. But
so is his cape alive?
No. It's like a technological though, or it's like a material kind of like I would want to say maybe it's similar to like the Fantastic Four, like their different costumes, or even like Edna Mode creating it out of a material, but it's not sentient necessarily. It can interact with technology given the right circumstances.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
But what comes to mind for me is that episode of Doctor Who. Are you my mummy? I don't know if anyone would know that. And I hope
My Doctor Who knowledge is lacking.
no one that actually has a British accent listens to this. Here's my terrible rendition.
Certainly not the Brit who we had on a couple episodes.
Oh, yeah,
back.
no.
Yeah, we'll just hope he's not listening.
So number 6 is Raven of DC Comics. And Raven uses her cape as a means to portal and access those powers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but contributor Paul frequently, he's not an editor. I'm sorry, I just promoted him and demoted him. Paul, who's been on the podcast a couple times, he specifically was like, hey, please put Raven on there. And surprisingly, I don't know why I didn't have her on the list because as any longtime listeners know, I have a running joke of trying to sneak Teen Titans into every podcast, even where it's not called for. Yeah, Raven's got one of those. Hers has some very rare few superheroes have the like hood that gives them perpetual shadow, and she has that very like pointed like bird like point over her face. Her cape sometimes does serve as wings, and then I think very very uniquely she changes the color of her cape symbolically, which is one of my favorite things. There's a very, very, I think it's called Nevermore, a very famous episode of the Teen Titans animated series where Beast Boy and Cyborg end up inside of her head and they meet all of her different emotions. This was like the proto Inside Out, thanks Disney. But each different emotion is represented by a different cape color. And so the pink one is the joy. Gray, I think, is the sadness. And then there was a red one with her demon eyes that was the one that was closest to her father Trigon. And then kind of I think it was the 4th season of that show when she finally defeats Trigon, she dons the white cape. And the white cape has also shown up frequently in the comic books as like I am no longer clouded by the demonic energy of my father.
A symbol of freedom and...
Yeah. Kind of like taking the raven and almost turning her into a dove kind of symbol. It's pretty cool. So now we're about halfway through the list. And we got away with Dr. Doom because he has flip-flopped. I mean, he did spend some time as Iron Man. But our honorable mention is a villain. But I thought the cape, I don't care about the dude. The cape itself is what deserved the mention. The honorable mention goes to the Hood from Marvel Comics. His name is Parker Robbins, the Hood. Robin Hood. He's a villain in Marvel Comics who actually stole his cape/cloak from a demon, which the cloak itself gives him the power to teleport and turn invisible while he's holding his breath. So he did like any sensible person would do and immediately turned to petty crime. But he's been a recent player in the kind of like Hell's Kitchen stories where he's making a bigger bid to become a viable threat with like Tombstone and Kingpin. Kingpin's untouchable, but the Hood's one of those kind of mob boss type guys. The cape also allows him to see through Doctor Strange's illusion, so he can like actually see the Sanctum Sanctorum, which is usually hidden on Bleecker Street. And the cape is possessed by a Nisanti demon from Dormammu's realm. So this gets all magic and stuff. But the cape is slowly possessing him and will kill him, and Doctor Strange has warned him to take it off. But he's like, nah, man, it's cool. Like, I like committing crimes and holding my breath while I do so.
My question.
Sure.
With the Hood, if you take it off for periods of time, can you prolong your use before death? Because I'm here for it. I'm into it.
Good question. Yeah, you're into the demon cape?
Yeah. Like I'd take a demon cape. I would be down to teleport places versus having to fight LA traffic to go places.
Actually, I don't know. I've never seen him without the cape on. That would be a question for the resident Sorcerer Supreme. But I know that from what little I've seen of the Hood, and he mostly shows up like in the recent Defenders books, and he's actually in a Hawkeye book right now. But he's always wearing that thing, and it's just a big red cape. But he stole it from a demon, so.
Do you see him at home, though? Like, do we see the Hood go home and, like, relax?
And hang it up for the day?
Yeah, maybe he hangs it up so Doctor Strange doesn't have all of the data to really make...
I don't know. Marvel, get on this. We want to know. We need a series of the Hood and what he does when he's not committing crime and holding his breath.
Really just need to know in case I encounter a demon and...
Oh, okay.
You know, am I going to take their cape?
It's a good reference to have.
Yeah.
So I actually also have number 5 on our list, who, again, he's the primary reason I had to make the distinction of like a cloak is a cape for the purposes of this podcast, because number 5 on our list is Cloak from Marvel Comics. He is one half of the duo Cloak and Dagger. Tyrone Johnson, after being exposed to an experimental chemical, was seized by a hunger, and he was shrouded in strange darkness. He kind of became darkness that only abated in the presence of Dagger, who is like the embodiment of light. And Cloak's cloak actually kind of serves more as a protection for him, in the sense that he wants to hide his new strange dark form from other people. So his is one of the kind of cloaks that an artist will draw it taking up every inch of the page if they can. It seems to have no bounds. But it was more something he adopted to kind of hide the shadowy nature of himself, as opposed to his kind of radiant partner. It also kind of physically represents the Dark Force connection to him. And so, yeah, artists do choose to represent that in a variety of ways. But like, it's one of those things where it's like he opens the cape and darkness swallows whoever he kind of wraps around in the cloak. His entire body is linked to a pocket realm of darkness. And that realm of darkness compels him to absorb life force. So it's just, don't let him hug you, is what I'm saying. Like, it just kind of, you'll disappear inside of the cloak. But it is kind of cool, because it's like it's hiding a pocket dimension, but the pocket dimension is him. It's one of my favorite looking, because it's that kind of like purple and blue striped cloak. Mm-hmm. He also is one of those people who has the kind of perpetual shadow over their face, because he's so dark and sad.
He's a pocket dimension.
Yeah.
Like, pocket realm.
Got to keep that under wraps. All right. You got the next one on our list.
Number 4 is Superman, obviously from DC Comics. His cape is actually the blanket that he was sent to Earth in from Krypton, which is a neat, like, everyone who carries around their baby blanket got nothing on Superman.
But it's very validating, because it's like, yes, okay, I still have a couple
if
of like,
Superman does it, so can I.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily gonna wear my childhood teddy bears on my hip when I go out and fight crime, but like, I've still got them, so it's sentimental value. Yeah, Superman's cape is pretty standard. It's a red cape as well, sometimes bearing the symbol of the House of L or not. But we also didn't necessarily rank these in like which one is the most powerful. I mean, you'll see which one made it to the top of the list as being known for like being the cape. But like sometimes Superman's does or doesn't help him. I know in the Supergirl CW show, they actually gave her a new cape that was made out of some space fiber that she could like fling, and it would wrap itself tightly around whatever she flung it at, and then she could like pull the person. But it's like, at the end of the day, Superman's cape is just kind of that symbol of who he is, as opposed to the symbol on his chest as well.
Yeah, and I think Superman is the epitome of that superhero pose.
Yeah,
with the cape billowing behind you, and in all of Superman's different costume changes that I saw, the only one where he was missing the cape was when he was like irradiated, and like he was less fabric and more radiation. But every other
there was a jeans and a t-shirt Superman for a hot second there too. That was not my favorite look for Superman.
It's not regal enough.
Yeah, that's not truth, justice, in the American way.
So I think that he, since he is, the superhero, his cape is probably, one of the most important parts of his costume.
Yeah.
Which is why jeans and t-shirts is a no-go for Superman.
Sorry, Soups. That might work down on the farms of Smallville, but not in Metropolis. Number 3 on our list, we're taking a break from Marvel and DC Comics to bop over to Image. Number 3 on our list is Spawn. We would be totally remiss not to put the 90s favorite character. Any comic book fan who loved the 90s, or even didn't really love the 90s but just loved Spawn, will tell you that he has one of the coolest and creepiest overall looks of any vigilante. He is kind of part demon. I'm actually not super familiar with his. I know there's some demonic stuff going on in there, but his massive red cape is one of the like first things you'll notice about him. I mean, he does have that very striking black face with the white stripy eyes and the green, or not stripy eyes, but the stripes over his face and the green eyes. I'm doing a great job, guys. But his red cape, that's another one of those ones where artists love to draw it defying any version of it that had come before. It's like, I don't think was there this much material last time? Like everybody just draws it bigger and bigger. And sometimes it's tattered. Sometimes it's just a big, massive flowing fabric thing. Again, he's got the high collar. Got to have the high collar. Yeah. It seems to defy all physics and logic because it technically is an extension of his suit and therefore his body, because his body is covered in like a necroplasm. Don't know why the cape is a different color than the rest of the necroplasm, but
that was going to be my first question.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't have all the answers there. My only answer is fashion. But it can so that's one of the reasons that writers and artists say like, oh, it can transform because it's part of this. It's almost like the symbiote. You know what? Maybe Venom should have a cape next. But like if the symbiote could like grow a cape, and it can transform to massive proportions, it can protect him from bullets. It grants him flight and then therefore can act as a parachute or like a pair of glider wings. And it just, I mean, at the end of the day, it looks really cool. It looks ridiculous, but it's kind of that quintessential 90s superhero costume.
I kind of want to see Spawn parachuting down with his giant cape.
He's like, I'm going to get you eventually. I'm sure it's a lot cooler than that. But like, yeah, you can imagine him getting caught in an updraft and just floating away.
Trying to pull either side to navigate
Storm
through.
Flies up and is like, can I offer you some advice on how to do an aerodynamic costume?
Uh-huh.
All right, we've either got a copyright infringement of the century or a new crossover comic for you. You got the next one.
All right, number 2 is the Bat from DC Comics. Batman himself is almost made it to the tippy top.
I feel like he tippy tops a lot of the lists, so we have to kind of like be like, okay, in our hearts, Batman's probably number 1. In your hearts, Batman is probably number 1. But we got to give some other characters some time to shine.
We have to give other people a chance. But his cape is really cool because not only is it bulletproof, but the size of the cape and the color helps to not distract, but make hitting the target of Batman more difficult for enemies. Because as the cape moves, it draws your eye and you can't quite hit it. Jeff May made the comment that it's like a kite. It's like trying to hit a kite.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
It's it's weird the things that you think of, because like with X-Men, I'm like, oh, okay, I go to the 90s version, and for Batman, and whenever I think about his suit, I immediately go to the Arkham games, and the sense that you got having like the ability to kind of free fall fly in Arkham City, and then he could like extend the wings with like a straight like woo, like that is really like a kite, and if it's bulletproof, then hell yeah, I mean, there's no reason not to. I don't know if you can say the same about his faux kite man. Seems like a flaw in the design there, but maybe they swapped. Maybe they shop at the same fabric store.
Yeah,
or
have same tailor. It's also neat that when he was first drawn, they were wings. You know, they looked like bat wings, and then they kind of edited it a bit and made it more cape-like with the scalloped edges. But I think with him, he's the epitome of, yes, the cape is very functional, but that he's so much more menacing with the cape on. I think, you know, that the cape and the cowl, it just, especially the Silvestri cape, where like it's kind of sinewy. Like it's scary.
Yeah, like when it looks more like bat wings. Like
I don't want to do crime if that's the guy coming for me.
You heard it here first, folks. Mel does not want to do crime if Batman's on the case. Yeah, no, and I think his especially is that psychological warfare. It is the it makes him bigger than, because I'm even thinking of like Batman, and then you take the cape off, and that's like a whole bunch of negative space you've imposed on him. If he's got his arms out or whatever, like suddenly you can see through, and it's just a dude in his arms, and like, but the cloak makes him more of an amorphous figure in the dark, which I think is a really cool and essential. I mean, he is the caped crusader, so I mean that's not for nothing. But, sorry, Batman, you are not number one on this list. Number one on our list goes to Doctor Strange from Marvel Comics, who are having, like, the cape of capes. Now, we didn't judge necessarily on the effectiveness of the capes, but it definitely played a factor when considering Doctor Strange's cape. One of the most recognizable parts of his costume is the Cloak of Levitation, granted to him by the Ancient One. And it has appeared actually several times as a blue cloak. But that was then explained as like, that's the lesser Cloak of Levitation. But he got like, you know, he got his D&D style upgrade, and he's like, this is the
training cloak.
Yeah. Yeah, basically, for when you're just an apprentice. But when he became the Sorcerer Supreme, he was granted the red Cloak of Levitation. It has a pointed collar, much like a lot of his buddies, but it has those like even bigger prongs. It's like the collar stops at a point, but then it goes even farther. And sometimes it's curly,
kind of like floppy.
Yeah, but it's a very magical cape. It allows hovering. He can fly at subsonic speeds. It can even be ridden like a magic carpet, like if he were to sit or stand on it. I think this is not utilized nearly enough, but I love it. And the best part about this cape, which we kind of actually was my ultimate push to get this one on the top of the list, it has a degree of its own autonomy. It's able to act even when it's not being worn. It can be sent off. It can grab onto objects like ledges. It can stop bullets, and it has been destroyed and reformed several times over. Loki even had a version that he like picked up all the scraps of Loki became the Sorcerer Supreme for like a hot second there. So he picked up all the shreds of Doctor Strange's cape, which had he partially had a hand in destroying, but he sewed it back together. It didn't look very good. And then ultimately, the way that this has been translated into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it even has a bit of sass to its sentience, making the Cloak of Levitation the most fashionable, functional, and must-have of all the superhero capes.
I want that one. I don't want the hood cape.
Yeah, you take it back?
Yeah, I take it back. I want this one.
I think Doctor Strange would be much more able to help you with this one, and I don't think it's going to kill you. Maybe if you fall off on the magic carpet.
I would ride it like a magic carpet constantly, and no lie, would sing a whole new world the whole time.
I think that is the perfect solution. And I mean, Doctor Strange has got to be taking some notes here. It's a very good cape. I mean, all of these capes I think are fantastic. Capes, cloaks, hoods, whatever the heck they are.
Whatever.
But they are very cool, each different in their own way. And I think it's cool to see that they all seem to be a very conscientious choice on behalf of the superheroes who wear them. Maybe not as much Doctor Doom, but I mean, his even still, like, he'd just be a dude in a suit of armor without it.
It serves a purpose.
Yeah.
It may not be the most functional of purposes, because I don't think a guy in a giant silver suit of armor needs any more intimidation tactics, but maybe it makes him feel better, and we shouldn't judge him for that.
No, I don't think we should judge Dr. Doom at all. And if anything else, I hope that this podcast has maybe helped to rehabilitate the image of capes in your mind after the damage done by Disney's Incredibles. So to recap our list, honorable mention goes to the Hood from Marvel Comics. Number 10 is Doctor Doom from Marvel Comics. Number 9 is Shazam from DC Comics. Number 8 is Storm from Marvel Comics. Number 7 is Mr. Miracle from DC Comics. Number 6 is Raven from DC Comics. Number 5 is Cloak from Marvel Comics. Number 4 is Superman from DC Comics. Number 3 is Spawn from Image Comics. Number 2 is Batman from DC Comics. And number 1 is Doctor Strange from Marvel Comics. So were our choices a fashionable fit, or does this list have some loose threads? If we missed someone that you think should be on the list, be sure to check out our blog and send us your opinions at podcasts@sideshow.com. And that was the top 10 superhero capes. Do you enjoy the Geek Culture Countdown? We are proud to bring you pop culture content completely ad-free, but that doesn't mean we don't need your support to help keep us going. Please take a moment to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting platform and help spread the word about our podcast. We welcome fan feedback. Email us at podcasts@sideshow.com with your thoughts and suggestions for how we can make our shows even better. Plus, tune in for our other pop culture podcasts. See your favorite comic and film characters evolve across 2 generations in the bi-weekly Then and Now podcast. Hear exclusive interviews with celebrities and pop culture industry leaders as they let their geek side show in Look Who Showed Up. Then get all the latest pop culture news with our daily briefing, a 2-minute breakdown of all the biggest geek headlines perfect for your Alexa or Google News briefings. We wouldn't exist without your continued support. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to let your geek side show.